Next, senior Trump administration officials are heading to Saudi Arabia to start peace talks with Russian and Ukrainian negotiators, according to U.S. officials familiar with the plan. A Ukrainian official, however, says the news came as a surprise to Kyiv, who has no plans yet to send a delegation. What's more, Donald Trump's Ukraine envoy says Europe won't have a seat at the negotiating table, a move that puts EU states on the back foot. Well, amid those concerns, President Emmanuel Macron is set to convene EU leaders in Paris on Monday for an emergency summit on the war in Ukraine. It comes on the heels of the security conference that's been taking place in Munich, which was supposed to focus on how to end the war. Well, speaking in Munich, however, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance failed to address Ukraine. Well, to talk more about this, let's bring in Richard Werly, journalist at Swiss Blick. It's a pleasure to have you with us on the program today. So the summit, rapidly organized by Macron, is set to take place on Monday. What can we expect to come out of this meeting?
Well, that's a very good question because we don't know yet exactly neither the agenda nor the participants. The information about that emergency summit in Paris was leaked yesterday afternoon in Munich, while the US administration officials were still talking to the media. But we do not know yet what President Macron will put in the agenda, and that is very important. One issue is to know how many European leaders will gather to Paris, because there are also voices within the EU. For example, this morning here in Munich, the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, Luc Frieden, said he was not too happy to hear that some European countries only will be convened to Paris. He said there is a need for unity of the 27. So as you can see, it is far from being a success, this emergency meeting in Paris.
Now, if the talks go ahead with no major European power at the table, is there any possibility of discussing how to end the war without giving in to Russia?
Well, we believe here in Munich that there are three main questions on the agenda for Emmanuel Macron, who was not present himself in Munich. France was represented by its Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jean-Noël Barrot. Question number one is how the Europeans managed to get to the table of the negotiation between Trump and Putin. As it was said, neither Trump nor Putin wants the European to be part of this negotiation. So how can the European manage to be at that table? What type of leverage do they have? That's the first question. Question number two is what strategy for Ukraine? Because President Zelensky here in Munich on Saturday called for a European army in which he wants the Ukrainian army to be integrated. Was there any response to that? Not yet. So we will see in Paris. Question number three is, as far as the defense spending is concerned, we hear a lot of figures here in Munich. Everybody say, we agree to spend more, but how much and what type of weapon will they buy? The European, will they buy from the US, or will they buy European equipment, as President Macron has emphasized?
Now, NATO chief Mark Rutte said Europe had to come up with what he called good proposals for securing peace in Ukraine if it wanted to be involved in those US-led talks. In your opinion, what could such proposals look like?
Well, you've got two issues that people are discussing at the moment. Number one issue is deployment of European troops in Ukraine to secure a possible ceasefire. But very clearly, Vladimir Putin doesn't want that, because European troops, that would mean NATO troops in Ukraine. That is the first issue. Second issue is how the Europeans manage to give Ukraine more weaponry, more equipment to resist a potential aggression from Putin again. And then we come to the defense spending, because Europeans will not have to spend money only for themselves, for their own defense, but they will have also to spend defense for Ukraine.
Now, President Volodymyr Zelensky has effectively been, I think it's safe to say, blindsided by this development. Is there anything that he can do now to change the course in Ukraine's favor?
Well, if you listen to U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, who is talking at the moment, I can see him on screen, and he was here yesterday. He is very close to Trump. He said that there are three possibilities for Ukraine to convince Trump to be at the table. Number one is sign a kind of agreement, especially regarding the minerals in Ukraine. Make sure that Trump has something to say to the American electorate to prove that peace in Ukraine brings dividend for the American people. Number two two, Ukraine should be realistic when it comes to its territorial concession to Russia. And number three, Ukraine should be able somewhat to convince the Europeans to play their part in the defense of the country. So that are the advice of Senator Lindsey Graham yesterday in Munich, and he has the ear of Donald Trump.
U.S. Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth, speaking in Brussels on Wednesday, said it was unrealistic that Kyiv should join NATO. Given this, where does membership stand for Ukraine? Is this wishful thinking as things currently stand?
Ukraine in NATO at the moment, or in NATO as a kind of part of the negotiation, it's unrealistic. Vladimir Putin won't take it, and Donald Trump doesn't want it. Now, what would happen for Ukraine? One proposal, very interesting, put forward by Lindsey Graham, the senator I was mentioning, he said yesterday, one possibility would be for the US to put in that negotiation a clause so that if Vladimir Putin, I repeat, if Vladimir Putin tries anything against Ukraine after a ceasefire, then Ukraine would be automatically admitted into NATO. So this is an interesting proposal. Ukraine will not be in NATO at the moment. The door will be closed. But as soon as Putin steps in again militarily, then the door will open. But we have no clue whatsoever whether Donald Trump agrees on that proposal.
Richard, great to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much for your time.